Welcome to the Grail Standard. I'm Sir Yvain. So I wanted to talk about the dangers of moving away from chivalry, right? And I've talked about this before, but in particular, I'm going to talk about this in relation to the political left because I've noticed that they sometimes justify horrible things that they shouldn't be justifying. Especially because if you were to have looked at, say, leftism back in the 90s, it's really morphed from what it is today. Back in the 90s, when I think of people who ascribe to 90s leftism, it'd be like people like Bill Maher, right? Bill Maher is a 90s liberal, right? But the modern day version of what they call SJWs, you got to be careful because they believe in horrible things that they justify horrible things. And so I thought this is a very good example to point out that now this isn't unique to leftism. I'm sure that in the future, once leftism fails, there'll be another ideology that will do the same thing or something similar. But it's just important to be very, very careful about sticking to your code and sticking to chivalry. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about is this idea that, you'll see a lot of people on the left say things like, it's not racism if you don't have institutional power. And the way that I see this is a justification for racism, right? So it's kind of weird. So the white leftists will, when they see their non-white leftists making racist statements, they'll say things like, "Oh, like I just said, oh, it's not real racism because it doesn't have institutional power." But that to me just seems like moving the goalpost, right? So it's like, yes, at that point, so when they're talking about the regular people that say that that are not white people, that are not Caucasians, that say racist things, they're like, "Oh, I'm just moving it down the goalpost. I'm just moving the goalpost down." So it's like, we'll just kick it down the curb because it's not a problem right now. But what happens when that person who's racist gets into office, if they ever do? Well, history has shown us that if someone who's racist gets into office, they're almost guaranteed going to implement racist policies, which are always going to result in people's deaths. So when I first encountered this, I was incredibly shocked because I would have thought that the idea of anybody justifying racism, I would have thought at this point in time that it's such an unjustifiable position to be racist that nowadays you wouldn't see anyone justifying it. And yet the left, people who champion these ideas, who champion themselves as progressives and say, "Oh, well, we're against racism," these are the same people who spread the ideology that oh, it's not racist if they don't have institutional power. So they're effectively justifying racism, right? And the Bible does talk about Satan and how he will make things that people know are wrong to be correct. And it seems to me that this is actually what's happening here. To be honest, as somebody who was a little bit skeptical about the end time prophecies, it is very interesting to me that people make this statement nowadays, right? But it goes one step further. So they'll say, "Oh, these people don't have institutional power." So then let's talk about Louis Farrakhan. Now, for those of you who don't know, Louis Farrakhan is a very famous African-American conservative Muslim in America, right? Now, on his TikTok, he has, at the time when I checked it years ago, he had over 1 million followers. Now, this man literally said on a TikTok video that you could find, he said, "The Jews are evil." Now, this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Now, Tamika Mallory at the time, who was the head of BLM, she was brought on The View, which is a American TV show up with these liberal panelists, and she was asked by one of the panelists to say, "Do you denounce Louis Farrakhan for making, these anti-Semitic statements, these racist remarks?" And she said no, she wouldn't do it because he's helped the African American community. And what was really interesting about this was she then later turned around and said, oh, but the BLM does not supports the rights of all races. And it's like, well, this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Why you have to stick to the code of chivalry, right? Because, and it comes back to the argument where the leftists will say it's not racism if they don't have institutional power. Louis Farrakhan, has over 1 million subscribers at this point on TikTok, right? Is that not institutional power? If you have over 1 million subscribers on TikTok, right, and you have videos up there that are racist, right, then obviously you're spreading racism, right? What's very interesting about this is that Louis Farrakhan has not been, the last time I checked, he has not been kicked off TikTok, right? So my question is how can Tamika Mallory at the time make the statement that BLM is against racism when she would not denounce an obviously racist man? Now, irrespective of whether or not he's done good for the African American community, it doesn't change the fact that they're making the statement that Jews are evil, or you could replace the Jews with any other race. Making the statement that any race is objectively evil is a racist statement in and of itself. And 20 years ago, people would have agreed, the vast majority of people would have agreed with me about that, right? And yet nowadays, there's a significant amount of the population in America who believe that it's okay. I'll give you another example of their hypocrisy, right? So there's a term that white leftists use in America called Uncle Tom, right? Now, that term Uncle Tom, if you were to actually look up the definition of the word Uncle Tom, what it refers to is as a black man considered to be submissive or servile to white people. In other words, a person regarded as betraying their culture or social allegiance, right? So it's a pejorative term, right? Now, non-white people use a different word. Non-white people, especially black people, use a different word when referring to the same thing, which is house N. So obviously you know what the N word is. So that they'll say that person is a house N. And this has been, you can go on TikTok, you can go on in the internet, you can find numerous examples of people calling people like Larry Elder a house N. Now here's the thing. The term house N and Uncle Tom, they actually mean the same thing. They mean the exact same thing, right? But the weird thing is that white people or non-dark-skinned people will use the word Uncle Tom, while African Americans will use the term house N. Now here's the thing. Those terms mean exactly the same thing. They mean exactly that, they refer to the same exact concept. So it's not, so there's no point in these people, especially the white people who use the word Uncle Tom, because they mean they mean the same term that the other people are using. But it doesn't even make any logical sense. It's like if you're using a word that's an alias for another word, you're using the actual word. It doesn't make sense to use one version of the same word. One version of the word is politically correct, but the other is not. They mean the same thing. So semantically, they're the same exact word. Right? But this is exactly what you're going to talk about. This is exactly the reason why you need to stick to chivalry, right? Because for whatever reason, there's always going to be entities, whatever you want to call them, who are going to try to trick you into believing that things that are wrong are right. It's never going to go away. It's always going to exist. Just like the founding fathers said, the eternal price of freedom is vigilance, right? You need to always be aware of this. This is the reason why you need to have a defined code, right? Because when you don't have a defined code, you fall into moral relativism. And the thing is that there's a famous quote, I think, by a man by the name of Victor Stenger, who passed away, who said that good people do good things and bad people do bad things, but religion makes good people do bad things. I like to change that to good people do good things and bad people do bad things, but ideology makes people do bad things, right? And it's 100% true, right? It's like the vast majority of human beings that I've encountered, are compassionate individuals. But all it takes is one person teaching you a bad idea that can completely make something that you knew was wrong before. So the path to damnation doesn't take place in one big step. It takes place in many small steps. First you do one, you take one step towards evil, and then you justify it. Then you take another small step toward evil, and you justify that. And eventually you keep doing that until you're so far away from where you originally were, and you're so evil at that point, but you didn't become evil in one fell swoop. It was one small step, one evil justification at a time. So I thought I would end this episode of the Grail Standard by letting you know that keep to the faith. Be very careful about what you believe. You should always believe that all human beings are born with God-given rights, right? That all human beings are created in the image of God. Because if you stop believing that, you can be convinced to do bad things. This was the Grail Standard with Sir Yvain. Thank you for everyone for listening, and I will see you on the next one.